What's going on, man? Welcome back to the basement. I'm Ron, and today's Monday, which means it's time to talk through my top 10 fantasy football lessons learned from Week 14 as we look forward to Week 15 and the rest of the fantasy playoffs here. We're going to talk through 10 stats, usage trends, nuggets, everything you need to know as we head into the fantasy playoffs. It is crunch time. We have, one game tonight, and then it's the fantasy playoffs. So let's talk about everything you need to know. As always, if you enjoy, leave a like, subscribe if you're new. And the first thing we'll talk about here is the rookie receiver report. It is world famous, of course, sponsored by Underdog Fantasy. Make sure you check them out. Use promo code RON. They will match your first deposit up to $1,000. And you will have a free pick waiting in the pick'em lobby, 0.5 total yards higher on Joe Burrow. And you can go check out, they have NFL, NBA, they have college basketball. They are all over the place. And you will find a link in the description and the comment section down below. Now, with the rookie receiver report, as always, we have every rookie that has run 150 or more routes. I've taken off anyone that has major injuries like Theo Johnson. We have the Week 12, Week 13, and Week 14 route participation share. So that is just, are you on the field during pass plays? Targets per out run, are you commanding volume on a per route basis? Yards per out run, are you commanding yards on a per out basis? Your efficiency, anything over 2 is very good. Targets per out run, anything over 25% is elite. Anything over 20% is good. First downs per out run, are you not only getting big gains and yardage totals, but are you moving the chains of your offense? Anything over 10% is very good. And then PFF grade, how are you looking on the field? Anything over 80 is good. And this is the change week to week in your PFF grade. Now, as always, the top dog as we sort these by a PFF grade is Brock Bowers. Now, he actually had a down game, just 10 targets. I think he only had like 5 catches. He had under 10 PPR points, but it was a weird game. Michael Mayer got 10 targets. They switched their quarterback from Aiden O'Connell to Desmond Ridder. That might hurt him in the near term, but as we've said all along with these per out numbers, Brock Bowers, in terms of dynasty value, is a monster. In terms of redraft, it's tough to... I don't want to panic just yet because he has made it work with several different quarterbacks so far. It could have just been one off game. Now, with Malik Neighbors, he came into this game with an injury. He still played 93% of the routes. I would have hammered the under on 93%. So he comes out here, he plays hurt, shows some grit, and this is just kind of the theme of these Malik Neighbors performances with Drew Lock or Daniel Jones, that he gets 10 targets, but he gives you 5 catches, 79 yards, which is fine, but it's not amazing production with an 80-plus PFF grade. Ladd McConkey was hurt last night. We have Brian Thomas Jr. He gets a career-high 12 targets, 8 catches, 86 yards. He's the focal point of this offense. It just sucks that his healthy games couldn't line up with Trevor Lawrence's healthy games, right? Brian Thomas misses a stretch of games and gets banged up. Then Trevor Lawrence gets banged up, and now he's out for the year. If Brian Thomas could have gotten Trevor Lawrence the entire year, he would have been an amazing league winner. We can talk about Marvin Harrison Jr. The per out numbers are all starting to just kind of get mid, which is like, it's not the end of the world. He is not all that efficient right now. 21.5% targets per out run is actually very good, but he's turned 20 targets over his last 2 weeks into just 9 catches. This past week, he had 8 targets, 4 catches, 49 yards. I'm not a huge catch rate guy, especially on a player like Marvin Harrison Jr., where a lot of his catches are downfield, right? 8 out of like 12, 13, 14. So his catch rate's going to be lower, but you would like more out of 8 targets is kind of what I'm getting at. But he's still a rookie. Redraft, he's been a disappointment. Dynasty, I'm still very much fine with him. Then we have Rome Odunze. This is his best game so far in terms of fantasy football. He gives you 2 touchdowns, but it's a little bit overshadowed by the 2 touchdowns. Just 5 targets, 4 catches, 42 yards isn't an amazing day by any means. I will say, they played the 49ers. It was a tough defense. He did increase his PFF grade by the most he's increased it this season, but he still just had a 1.4 yards per out run in this game. So it wasn't like a monstrous game. He got in the end zone twice, which is great, but in terms of efficiency, it wasn't all that. But I will say, if 2 of his catches were in the end zone, he's not going to have the room for all the yardage totals, but still a little bit underwhelming from a Rome Odunze, but a step in the right direction. And then we'll talk about 3 more players. I don't want to just keep on repeating myself with some of these guys. So we have Xavier Worthy. He played last night, jumped up to 81% of the routes, which is great, but nothing all that crazy from an output perspective. I do want to look up his exact box score here, but he is now at 4 games back to back of 40-plus receiving yards. He had a 5-game drought before that. So it was looking really dead for him. I mean, he had 6 targets yesterday, 5 catches, 41 yards, which is, it's a nice day, but it's not anything too crazy. But again, he's had over 40 receiving yards in each of his last 4 games. Before that, he hadn't had a 40-plus yard receiving game from weeks 10 through 5. So he was in a drought. Now he's getting production, but it's still not like amazing production to be super excited about. Then we have Xavier Legette. This is a sad one. Decreases his PFF grade by minus 1.5. He commands targets. 17.7% targets per run is really good. It's higher than Keon Coleman. It's higher than Roma Dunze. It's higher than Xavier Worthy. This is a really good number, but the efficiency just hasn't been there so far. Under 60 PFF grade. He had 8 targets, 2 catches, and he had the brutal drop down the stretch. Could have been the game-sealing touchdown. So that was sad to see. Would have liked him to catch that and just kind of build on that momentum. Xavier really gets tough right now because he's commanding targets, but he's not doing a whole lot with them. But that at least means he's getting open, or they're trying to feature him in this offense. Then we have Jalen McMillan, who had his first real homecoming game. 7 targets, 4 catches, 59 yards, 2 touchdowns. It was his first game ever with 2 or more yards per out run in a single game. His per out numbers for the entire year are still brutal, but you can also say he's been playing next to Mike Evans and Chris Godwin half of that time, and he did increase his PFF grade by 1.6. So those are the rookies I think are worth talking about. And then I was going to say we have somebody playing tonight, but we don't. We do have a lot of injuries, right? We have Jalen Coker down. We have Ladd McConkey down. You would have loved to see Ladd McConkey play last night. But let's move on from that to our second lesson learned, which is just kind of a Monday Night Football recap. We have Isaiah Pacheco ramping up here. He went from 37% of the snaps, you can see, 7 carries, 44 yards, and a target, to 46% of the snaps, so a 9% increase. 14 carries, so that's double the amount of carries, 14 for 55, and then 4 targets on the day. It was just 8.1 PPR points, but the Chargers defense is very good, and it's nice to see Pacheco ramping up, trending in the right direction with 18 opportunities in this past game. And then on the flip side, you had Kamani Vidal out-snap Gus Edwards for the first time this season. Gus Edwards, I will say, he did put up the better fantasy day. He had 10 carries, 36 yards, and a touchdown. But Kamani Vidal had 8 carries, 34 yards rushing, just 1 target in the passing game. But this could be kind of the passing of the torch. I would assume that even if Kamani Vidal outsnaps Gus Edwards, you'll still see more rush attempts go to Gus Edwards because he's kind of more of their thumper, and we'll see more targets than just 4% on 47% of the routes go to Kamani Vidal. It wasn't amazing, but there's a little bit of a passing of the torch. We'll see if he can ever kind of fully supplant Gus Edwards, but I wouldn't be super, super excited about it. And I will say as well, on the bottom there, that's huge. Hassan Haskins going from 13% of the snaps to 2%. So we're getting very close to no more Haskins and it being like a true 2-man backfield. After that, we have Puka Nacua. Puka Nacua is a monster. He was on the front cover for our favorite picks of this season. You can kind of just throw him on the trash heap of guys that I loved, but one reason or another, whether that's Tua's concussions or Nico Collins' hamstrings, missed time. But we have 5 games where Puka Nacua doesn't leave early due to injury, as shown by Dynasty IM here. He's averaging 23.7 points per game. That would be more than Jamar Chase as the wide receiver 1 overall in fantasy football. He's been crushing, and somebody that if you have him and you snuck him into the playoffs, I would feel very, very good about. I think he's somebody that could get drafted as a top 3 wide receiver next year for redraft, a top 8 type of pick. He gets a bump in Dynasty as probably a top 5 wide receiver in Dynasty. And then, as shown here, no second-year wide receiver has ever posted a 23.7 points per game or better. If you remember, guys like CeeDee Lamb, guys like Amon-Ra St. Brown, we talked about in the offseason, they usually need a stepping stone year where they get to 16 points per game. That's what CeeDee Lamb and Amon-Ra St. Brown did in year 2, and then they got up to 20+. Getting all the way up to 23.7 in your second year is huge, but I will say again, it was, it's on a smaller sample with just 5 games played so far, but he does look like a monster. He had the crazy sideline catch, the game-winning touchdown. He's just an absolute monster. And I do want to make note on the other side. I thought this stat was funny. I feel like it should have gotten way more traction on Twitter. But Josh Allen gave you the best fantasy football points output ever for a quarterback ever, right? You see 1961 for George Blanda. Josh Allen had 3 touchdowns in the air, 3 touchdowns on the ground. Just an all-time performance, and he lost that game. He is the only quarterback to put up 43 or more points in a game and not win. You can see this entire list, you can't find a loss until Justin Fields at 18th in terms of the best single-game outputs of all time. Now, after that, we have the Jets running back split. Now, this one was crazy. even as a Jets fan and somebody that follows a lot of Jets, like beat reporters and media, I wasn't expecting this narrow of a split. This was out of left field. We had 15.7 PPR points for Isaiah Davis on 16 opportunities, and then 16 opportunities for Braylon Allen with 12.1 PPR points. Really, the difference was the touchdown, right? You can see here Braylon Allen 11 for 43 on the ground. Braylon Allen also had 4 catches on 5 targets for 38 yards. Isaiah Davis, 3 catches for 27 yards on 6 targets, 10 carries, 40 yards, and a touchdown. They were both used a ton. Now, this right here is the Fantasy Life Utilization Report comparison tool, and you can see that they actually preferred Isaiah Davis's usage, right? He's getting used more in the passing game. He's getting used more even in like the short yardage situations. He has 67% short down and distance. There wasn't any inside the 5 carries, but I would have assumed that went to Braylon Allen. So Isaiah Davis has an interesting role here, and where it went from, okay, Braylon Allen's like an RB2 rest of season, to now both of these guys are kind of like brutal. Not brutal, they're fine, but now they're like RB2, RB3 fringe type of starts. So kind of like what you've been doing with when Bucky Irving was healthy between Bucky Irving and Rachaad White, but it's a worse offense. I do want to remind everybody that this is still the Jets. Yes, they scored a bunch. You can see here Aaron Rodgers finally threw for 300-plus yards. It's the first time since 2021. Garrett Wilson had 114. Devontae Adams had 109. And I think we're going to see even more from Allen Lazard moving forward as well. But this isn't going to be the norm, sadly. They're not going to have 400-plus yards and 26 points every week. This is an offense that has struggled and been, kind of like league average. So the overall points, the overall yards aren't going to be there for these two running backs the entire year. So I wouldn't get too excited. Both of them now just kind of become guys who all rank in like the RB 25 range in a given week moving forward. But Isaiah Davis, we will do a waiver wire video tomorrow. He'll be one of the top guys mentioned. Now, after that, let's talk about our 5th takeaway, a Sam Darnold masterclass, which is funny to talk about right after the Jets, right? Jets do everything they can, score a lot of points, they lose, and we get to sit here and watch a Sam Darnold masterclass, 0 interceptions. I want to say 0 turnovers, right? I don't think that he fumbled. He had 347 yards, just 6 incompletions, and 5 touchdowns on the day, throwing it all over the yard, looked amazing. Addison and Jefferson were both top 3 wide receivers on this week, pending Monday Night Football. Of course, you have T. Higgins and Jamar Chase to play, but monstrous day for the Vikings. And on the other side, I mean, if you have Drake London, Kyle Pitts is an afterthought at this point. Even though Kyle Pitts' usage in this game was fine, he had like 6 targets, which if you're a tight end, that'll do. He only caught 1 of them, and this has been the story with the Falcons recently. Is over the last 4 weeks, they have 0 passing touchdowns and are bottom 5 in dropback EPA, which is just your passing efficiency per play. That takes into account situational stuff, downs and distance. The only passing games that have been worse over the last 5 weeks, or the last 4 games for the Falcons last 5 weeks because they had a bye, is Dallas, Giants, Colts, Jaguars. Not good company for the Falcons, especially when we have guys like, Darnell Mooney we're trying to start, Drake London we're trying to start, Kyle Pitts we're trying to start, but at least Bijan still did his thing and still looks great. And we'll see if, they go to Penix here moving soon. Then we have our 6th takeaway, the Charbonnet Takeover. He's been amazing every time they call on him. This past game versus the Cardinals, he puts up 22 carries. I'm trying to figure out, I think that they screwed up that stat line here, actually. Shout out Underdog, but I think actually that should be 22 for 134 and 2 rushing, 7 catches, 59 yards. So, yeah, 22 carries here, 134 rushing yards, 2 touchdowns, 7 catches, 59 yards, 38.3 fantasy points in PPR this week. Monstrous stuff. I don't know. I've gotten questions like, is he better than Kenneth Walker? They're just 2 different styles where Charbonnet is kind of like James Conner, where he gets what's blocked and he's very reliable. Kenneth Walker has a little bit more explosiveness. He runs kind of different. He'll have breakaway runs, but that hasn't been there in a while for Kenneth Walker, where he hasn't even really hit like over 12 PPR points, even though he's definitely had, I don't know if he's had 30 touches in a game since he's come back from injury, but he's definitely had like 20 plus and not done anything near this much with it. We'll see what this looks like when Kenneth Walker is back. I'm not sure what the timetable was for Kenneth Walker to be back, but in any game that Walker misses, and I streamed on Saturday, and I was saying, Charbonnet is a top 8 running back. Like, I ranked him RB8 this week. He is somebody moving forward, and any game that Walker misses is an RB1 at worst. Like, he's giving, like, Alexander Madison, Dalvin Cook type of vibes, where he is the perfect handcuff where it's not Braylon Allen, right? Braylon Allen, he comes in, and Isaiah Davis takes half the work. Charbonnet has now made it clear when Kenneth Walker misses, he will be taking all of the work to the tune of, yes, like almost 30 touches this past game. Then our 7th takeaway is the 49ers offense is back. This is a great tweet from Ryan Heath. In Brock Purdy games without at least 2 of Ayuk, Samuel, Kittle, McCaffrey, it's a 4-game sample. He's the QB5 in yards per game, QB1 in yards per attempt, QB1 in passer rating, QB1 in completion percentage, QB3 in fantasy points per dropback. Purdy's actually been really good this year when he's healthy. I would say that he is now fully all the way back here. And Juwan Jennings is absolutely eating. Of course, Kittle got 6 for 151, but Juwan Jennings 7 for 90 and 2 touchdowns. As long as Purdy is healthy, Juwan Jennings is going to be probably a league winner down the stretch here. So something to definitely monitor if you have him moving forward. Then we have Isaiah Guerendo. He was the big talking point. We had a bunch of handcuffs playing this week. Isaiah Guerendo was great. 15 carries, 78 yards, 2 touchdowns. He gave you 2 catches for 50 yards through the air. The issue is that he did get banged up, but it seems like it's not super serious. It seems like it was a sprain, like a foot sprain, and he could be back as soon as next week. So something to monitor. I will say, we'll talk about in the waiver wire video, it's tough to say who they go with moving forward. You see there's some volume towards Patrick Taylor. There's some volume towards Keyshawn Vaughn. They did sign Izzy Abanikanda off the street. So I don't know what to expect moving forward from the backfield if Guerendo was to go down. Something to definitely monitor moving forward. Speaking of handcuffs, we had Sincere McCormick have a nice game here. He had 15 carries, 78 rushing yards, 2 catches, 11 yards, only 10.9 PPR points, but he was like a goal line carry away from having a pretty great day. And JJ Zacharyson says here, he has like a great dump he does every Monday morning. It's a thread where he goes through all the stats for the given week. And it says Sincere McCormick saw 15 of 16 running back rushes for the Raiders. His 24% route share wasn't special, but it was better than the 18% from week 13. His snap shares over his last 3, 11%, 38%, 62%. He's now kind of the main back for the Raiders. And again, we've seen Pierce do this before. We saw it last year with Zamir White, where he just finds somebody late, he rides them, and if that's Sincere McCormick, that's a pretty decent like RB2 desperation guy moving forward in the playoffs if you did just lose like a Breece Hall and you don't have Braylon Allen on your bench. And I think Sincere McCormick is probably pretty comparable to Braylon Allen moving forward as well. Now, our 9th takeaway is the Eagles' passing game struggles have been absolutely brutal. Now, I do want to make it clear. They're winning games. They're probably a fine football team, but your passing game needs to be better to be like a true Super Bowl contender. I think that's what A.J. Brown's getting at here. He said, asked what needs to improve in the offense. A.J. Brown, he said passing. Now, I think that at one point, like on one part, he is definitely frustrated that he hasn't been getting the usage that he wants, but if this team is going to be serious, they're not going to be playing with the lead the entire game in the playoffs. You know, you're going to have drop back, throw the ball, do it well, and they've kind of struggled with that down the stretch here, and over the entire season, they're 11-2. Again, very good team. 17th in EPA per pass play, so that's like league average efficiency. And they're 31st in passing yards per game, 31st neutral pass rate. So they're not passing the ball a ton. They're not getting a ton of production. And when they do pass, it's like mid efficiency, which for a Super Bowl, a team with Super Bowl aspirations, you would like that to be more efficient, even if the volume is very low. Like we've seen in the past, like the Niners be 31st or 32nd in neutral pass rate, but they'll be league average in passing yards per game and then top 5 in passing efficiency. That's where the Eagles should be striding to be. It's just not where they're at right now. And for that reason, A.J. Brown is like the wide receiver 12 in points per game this year. You drafted him to be much better than that. Devontae Smith is the wide receiver 35-ish in points per game. Just a brutal run out. They just have no real need, especially in the regular season, right? I talk about what they need to do in the playoffs, but regular season, they have no real need not to just feed Saquon, not to just run the ball. And I will say for the Saquon heads out there, it was nice to see. I think that they're leaning into the MVP conversation a little bit. You did see, it didn't work, but you did see it was like 1st and 10 or 2nd and goal or 1st and goal. They tried just a normal Saquon carry from the 1. It got stuffed. Then they just pushed Jalen Hurts in. But they might, moving forward, start to give Saquon the benefit of the doubt and not push everything on the goal line, which, you know, could affect the fantasy playoffs. And then on the other side of this game, Bryce Young looks really good, man. I don't want to say real good. I don't want to get over my skis with Bryce Young because I still don't know how to feel about this. It reminds me of a Jared Goff type turnaround. I don't know that Bryce Young will ever be in MVP talks, but I think that he's probably a guy. And one of his biggest things that he's improved in is evading pressure. Last year, he led all quarterbacks with minus 26.9 EPA, that's expected points added, just in terms of your overall output. He costed his team 26.9 points on sacks. If you take a bad sack, it stalls drives. You end up punting the ball. It's one of the worst things you can do outside of turning the ball over is take a sack. This year, I will say the sample's lower, right, because he missed about like 4 or 5 games here, but he'd still be like bottom 10 if he played the entire season. He has lost as minus 4.6 EPA per play from sacks, the second lowest in the NFL, a massive improvement. So he's really taken a step ahead here. They're not winning games in particular, but they're keeping him close. Bryce Young looks competent. And Thielen right now is kind of, I don't know if I'd call him a league winner, but he looks really good, where he is the wide receiver 9 since returning at 17.3 points per game. That'll play. And then I will say really bad news that I just learned as I went live here is Jonathan Brooks tore the same ACL he tore last year in college. So that's awful. Usually it'll be the other one. If it's a surgically repaired one, I don't know. I'm not a doctor, but that's not good, and honestly kind of crushed for the kid, if I'm being honest. After that, we have just some messy backfields to get through. First of all, we have Tampa Bay. Bucky Irving was hurt. Apparently, there's a back injury that'll probably keep him sidelined out of this next game, which sucks because Bucky Irving was looking like a league winner. And now Rachaad White is kind of the main bell cow here, where he had 47 snaps to Sean Tucker's 11, and he ran 3 times the number of routes via J.J. Zacharyson here. Rachaad White had 24.9 PPR points. He had 17 carries, 90 yards, and a touchdown. 2 catches, 19 yards, and a touchdown. So he had an amazing day. And moving forward, as long as Bucky's out, Rachaad White is probably like a top 15 option at worst moving forward. Then we have Tank Bigsby, kind of out of nowhere with a takeover here. He goes from 46% of the snaps to 52%. So now he's flipped Etienne, being on the field more. He goes from 28% of the rush attempts to 69%. He had 18 carries, 55 yards, a touchdown on the ground, 2 targets, 1 catch, 7 yards, 20 opportunities in this game with a healthy Etienne. That is unprecedented for Tank Bigsby. Now, it's a bad offense. They're going to stall out a ton. They're not going to score a ton of points. But Bigsby, if that sticks, and we'll see if it sticks because this is kind of moving back and forth here, but as long as it sticks somewhat, and you can count him in for 12-plus touches in a given game, you can throw him in your RB2 spot if you are desperate here for the playoff stretch. Then we have Kendre Miller, back from the dead. No longer is Dennis Allen there. And in his first game back, he has 26% of the snaps, 10 carries, 32 yards, a touchdown. He has a target. A little bit of a downgrade for Kamara, who hasn't had 20 or more PPR points since week 9. But Kamara did still have 20-plus opportunities in this game. So he's still getting fed. He's still getting the targets. But Kendre Miller might steal some of those goal line carries, which could be a problem for Kamara's like big-time outputs where, you know, what was it? I don't know if it was Christmas Day, but he had the Christmas cleats on. He gave you like 6 touchdowns. Those outcomes are probably looking rough with Kendre Miller back in the mix. Then we have the Giants. Tyrone Tracy has kind of crawled his way out of the doghouse after a fumble. He is now at 84% of the snaps. Went from 45% of the rush attempts to 70%. Went from 20% of the routes in week 12 to now 70% now. Just full on bell cow. He had 10 targets in this game. 5 catches, 38 yards receiving, 16 carries, 45 yards, 1 touchdown on the ground. Just an amazing amount of volume, right? That's 26 opportunities with 10 targets. 10 targets for a running back is absolutely nuts. And he gets 19.3 PPR points on a team that cannot score at all. I'm trying to see what his schedule is the rest of the season. It's not amazing, but those targets will keep you afloat moving forward. Now, that is our top 10 lessons learned. Not a super long show, but I don't want these to be, they don't have to be an hour as we get down the stretch here. There's not a ton of new information, but that's our top 10 lessons learned. As always, if you enjoy, leave a like, subscribe, use promo code RON on Underdog Fantasy. If you're new, I'll have links to that in the description and the comment section down below. But as always, I will see y'all in the next one.
Stones, like this froze, ice cold, oh, oh.